Welcome to NetZero. I'm Cherry Song, a 17-year-old climate activist from South Korea. What are some exemplary initiatives utilizing nature-based solutions to combat climate change and enhance water resilience, and what can we all learn from them? Felicia Marcus is a climate policy luminary who serves as the William C. Landris Visiting Fellow at Stanford University's Water in the West program. With extensive experience in government, nonprofits, and law, she pioneers innovative solutions to urgent environmental issues. Her recent role involved in leading the California State Water Resources Control Board, where she oversaw the enforcement of laws concerning drinking water, water quality, and the state's water rights. It is our honor to welcome her to NetZero. Welcome to NetZero, Felicia.
Oh, thanks. It's my honor to be here.
The first question I want to ask is, can you highlight some successful examples of state-led nature-based solutions addressing climate and water challenges that you admire, and explain what key lessons can be gleaned from the efforts?
I think in the urban setting, one of the issues I'm closest to, and it mirrors things that are happening in other parts of the world, is the tremendous effort going on to try and capture stormwater. And in particular, in the LA area, an unusual coalition of equity, environmental, industrial, state, local, federal agencies came together to encourage the passage of a local measure that's going to yield $300 million US dollars a year forever to do multi-benefit project. This notion of taking a watershed-wide view and investing what will be billions of dollars at the local and at the top of the watershed level to create cleaner water and more water resources is one of the most exciting things going on across the world, but particularly in California at the moment. It takes a lot of work. It's more complicated than building a big thing. So it requires a lot of work with people on financing, policy levers. I mean, they're harder to do, but they're better.
So in your experience, how have state-led initiatives contributed to advancing nature-based solutions? And it would be great if you could provide specific examples of innovative programs integrating these approaches, like climate and water management strategies.
Giving money, raising money at a statewide level to support these efforts obviously is critically important because it's the only way to generate the kind of funding that we're going to need to do them. And you also need the state appreciation of it to allow for some of the regulatory flexibility that you may need to have multiple programs working. The state of California has done a number of things. One is they've recognized this as an important place where it's important for climate policy, but it's not your typical regulatory measure under the way we do our, sort of world leading climate regulation. So they've been working very creatively on integrating into their scoping plan a recognition that we need to ecologically manage these forests and take some of the underbrush out, which currently is sequestering carbon. So they have to be flexible enough to say, we're going to have a bit of an increase for a while, but in the long run, we'll prevent more devastation and we'll get these multiple benefits for water and wildlife and, most importantly, public health and safety.
How do you think we should be furthering equitable access to climate mitigation and adaptation measures, particularly for marginalized communities, because they're already underrepresented and they have disadvantages? What have you learned from making environmental agencies more responsive to diverse stakeholders?
Well, obviously there's funding and funding prioritization. I mean, a lot of it is around funding. There's funding and then there's respectful engagement. A big tenet of the environmental justice movement is with, not for, involving people meaningfully in the decisions that affect them, which is in some ways harder for some people than coming up with money, but both are critically important. In the drinking water arena, it was a huge focus for us because in 2012, the legislature passed the human right to water, and that the job wasn't just to regulate water agencies, but actually try and figure out how to get water to people. So as a result, we prioritize a lot of bond money, grants, but also loans to go to smaller underserved communities. We set aside $70 million out of a large bond proposition, and we have been distributing it to NGOs, now some private sector entities to give technical assistance to small communities. But it's really key to also give small communities and underserved communities grants so they can hire their own people, so they can develop the projects that we can then fund. And this administration has put billions of dollars into trying to get the lead out of lines all across the country in a way I've never seen. Similarly, the administration has put an amazing amount of money into getting water to tribes that historically have been left behind and don't have direct even running water over huge percentages of their communities. It's those kind of decisions that are important, but it's also how those decisions were arrived at through partnership, through discussion, through following the lead of the community leaders versus being patronizing and telling them what they should need. It takes a little more time, but you end up with more durable, useful, and lasting solutions. And the relationships are really a wonderful thing, whether with tribes or underserved communities. It really, I think, is what government really ought to do, but it takes more time. It's complicated, and you have to acknowledge the historical wrongs that are in the backdrop of what you are doing and not take it personally when people are unhappy, but try to help.
Last but not least, I wanted to ask, like, based on your experience in facilitating financial assistance for community infrastructure upgrades, what role do you see for innovative financing mechanisms and public-private partnerships during climate action?
It's a great question. I think I'm fond of saying, and not everybody likes this phrase, but it's going to take everybody, and all of the above approach, belt suspenders, flying monkeys, whatever it takes. We're going to need everybody who can help to help. And it's going to take so much money that we do have to look at where the private sector and innovative financing can come in. And there are the public-private partnerships, or P3s, that are promoted a lot and that a lot of communities are a little nervous about, that can be quite helpful in allocating risk, because the public sector is more risk averse for political and other reasons. But the key is making sure that the communities have enough legal assistance and enough expertise to feel that they can achieve a fair contract and bargain, and that they can enforce it.
Thank you very much for sharing your time today, Felicia. We learned a lot from your perspectives. This is climate activist Cherry Song. I add to the voices of my NetZero international youth peers to monitor the action of our world's leaders to achieve their net zero commitments. Together, we can achieve net zero.